You know what the number one issue I hear from weavers is, and it doesn't matter whether it's a newbie weaver or someone who has quite a bit of experience weaving, it is that people are too afraid to cut their hand woven cloth. I've even heard of experienced weavers having meters and meters of beautiful hand woven cloth sitting in the cupboard, not knowing what to do with it because they're too afraid to cut it. It doesn't have to be that way. Cutting your cloth is not scary at all. So what we're going to do to start with is actually cut some of my cloth. I'm going to show you some how different patterns, how different yarns, threads respond to being cut, and then after that we're going to have a look at a couple of easy methods that give you more security, and you will gain the confidence to cut your own cloth. Once you're able to do this, you'll realize that just like when you started weaving and it opened up this whole world of possibilities, once you can cut your cloth, it will once again open up an entire world of possibilities. So let's get going. First up, I have these two samples. This one has been wet finished, this one hasn't. So by wet finishing, I mean this one has sat in some warm, almost hot, soapy water for about an hour. It's been rinsed off, hung up to dry, and pressed. This one has come straight off the loom. Now both of these are wool. This is an 8-ply wool, I believe, and I have some bits of cotton running through that in wandering threads. That's a really cool technique. I'll have to show you that sometime. And they are both super wash wool as well. So usually with wool I'm a little bit more cautious when I'm cutting. I'm still not scared, I'm just cautious. And you will see why with the first sample, which is the unwashed one. Let's cut. Okay. Make sure you have a nice sharp pair of scissors for cutting your cloth too. So let's have a look at what this one's doing. If I just leave it to sit there, it's not going to do too much. It might start to spring apart a little more over time, but you can see what has happened here is a little bit of the weft thread has started to unravel just here. And if I mucked around with this, the same thing would happen. Because this has not been wet finished, those threads are not settled in together. They are just still sitting there loose and free. So that's what happens with that one. Let's have a look at the one that has been wet finished. And if you just compare these two samples as well, you can see the difference in wet finishing and not wet finishing. This one looks a lot more loose. The threads are more raised sitting up. This one is flatter, looks more uniform. Alright, let's compare. See how unscary that is? Alright, let's have a look at this one. You can see on the cut lines, it's fluffing a little bit, but compared to this piece, it's not coming away like this one was. So yes, my main aim with showing you this sample was the importance of wet finishing and how it really does finish the cloth, it changes the cloth, and when you're cutting, it helps the cloth as well. So let's just try and tease that one out the way that I did with the other one. Yes, it still wants to come out a bit, but not like the other one. It's not losing whole threads, it's losing a little bit of fluff. Okay, let's have a look at the next sample. Next one I've got here is a twill, and this is in 8-2 cotton. This is probably when I got my table loom and I was just mucking around and I guess having a go at 12 for the first time. So I've had this sample for quite a while. Now it's got a use. So let's have a look. This one also, I should say, has been wet finished and pressed. And being twill is quite, a tight weave. So let's have a look at what happens to this one. So just from cutting, very little trauma to this one. Let's tease it out a little bit. Still very little happening there. The odd stray thread there and there, here and there, if I really try and tease that out, I can get that out. But really, it doesn't do very much when I cut it. Like the wool, a little bit of fluff, but nothing to be worried about. What about if we go down to this? This looks like a straight draw twill here. And it's once again the 8-2 cotton. Okay, gives a nice clean cut. Tease it out. Still not much happening there. Okay, so you can see already there's a bit of difference between the cotton and the wool. Yes, wool needs a little bit more care, and I would say in general that the protein fibres, the animal fibres, do need a bit more care because they're springy, and cotton is more rigid, not so springy. Now, just this tiny section here, this is 8-2 cotton on the warp, and then for the weft I used a 4-ply wool. So let's have a look at that one. The combination of wool and cotton, and see how we go. You'll have to excuse my sick children coughing in the background. Okay, so once again we've got that nice clean edge. I can see a bit of fluff from the wool, but it's holding together beautifully. Little bit of fluff from the wool, and that's about it. This sample is another twill, but it's a little bit different, especially this part down here. This was on M and W threading, and this was kind of at the end of the warp, so this was the actual pattern I was treadling here. But when I got to here, I thought I'm just going to have a muck around and see what happens if I combine this and that. And what I got was quite a bit of a looser weave than up here. So I'm confident that if I cut this one, it would behave pretty much like this one that I already showed you, that I wouldn't have too much to worry about there. But the looser one, I wanted to cut that as well and see how that behaved. So I'll just turn it around because I can feel that it's much looser than this section. So this is 8-2 cotton again, and I'm just going to cut a piece of that. Okay, so even with the looser weave, there's still not much happening there. It's absolutely fine. What about if I cut into these bits with that have the longer warp floats there? Okay, so I've just cut a small strip of that, and still it's fine. The only thing with the longer float threads is, you know, they'll be sticking up a little bit, but it still looks absolutely fine to me. So I also have here, I just finished this towel, a tea towel, which is in the same structure as this one, but something happened in the wash that I wanted to show you. I thought would be a good illustration. This edge here, I always overlock my edges before they go through the wash, and I always put my dish towels or my tea towels through a hot wash once they're finished. Overlock first and then hot wash. And this one had an overlocking thread that was hanging off, and another one had an overlocking thread that was hanging off, and they got tangled up. And this one has obviously been roughed around a bit in the washing machine, pulled around, and it's pulled some of the threads out. But what I wanted to show you is, even though it's been through that kind of trauma, the only thing that has happened is this little corner has unraveled just a little bit here and here, and then it just stopped. So really, your cloth can probably take a bit more of a beating than you realise and still be fine. So let's go on to the techniques.